Hi, thank you for joining us and welcome to When to Use Final Expense, presented by the Independent Life Insurance Agent Association. Today we're going to talk about final expense insurance and if it's always the right choice for a client that we would typically think of as someone in a final expense demographic. So first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What is final expense insurance? Well, final expense life insurance, it's not anything fancy. All they are small whole life insurance policies. They typically have little or no cash value that's accessible, and they're designed to pay for burial costs, final expenses, in other words. Typically, we're going to see a benefit of like $10,000 to $30,000, maybe a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher in some cases, but it's not going to be a big policy. These are policies designed for individuals that are a little bit older, in a little bit less economically advantageous situation, and whose health status may be a little bit less ideal. The underwriting for final expense insurance is what makes it special. There's not going to be a medical exam with final expense. It's not even going to be like getting a non-med term policy. It's even easier than that. Final expense underwriting is very, very loose and is designed to accommodate a lot of different folks with a wide range of different potential physical ailments or colorful health histories. We won't go all the way into final expense underwriting today. If you want to learn more about that, check out our Final Expense 101 series at iliaa.org. So our typical final expense client is going to be somebody who's about 50 to 70 years old, and that's a pretty broad range. Most of the time we would narrow that up a little bit. Like if we were doing a direct mail campaign, we'd probably look more in the 55 to 65 range. But just to keep it a little broad, 50 to 70 years old, household income somewhere around $15,000 to $50,000 a year. We can trend toward the lower side of that spectrum in more rural areas and toward the higher side in more urban areas. And these are clients that, because of their less economically advantageous situation, may not have had as much access to health care over the course of their life. So they may have some additional health concerns more prevalent or more serious than we would see in the average population. For instance, a lot of final expense clients are going to be concerned with how their life insurance company treats diabetes or insulin use, oxygen therapy, that sort of thing. Now, the default approach when you're talking to a client in this demographic, let's say you've done a direct mail campaign, you sent it out to individuals 50 to 70 years old with a household income of $15,000 to $50,000. And if you're curious about doing that, let us know because we can help you design your direct mail campaign and train you how to use direct mail. But let's say you've done that, you've got your leads back in, you're calling them up. The default approach is if you get someone on the line who's interested, is to take them through final expense insurance. It's simple, it's quick, it's very loose underwriting, and it typically pays very well, upwards of 100% first-year commission in most cases. The premiums to the client are going to be a little bit higher with final expense than they would see with other types of insurance, and they are going to get fewer benefits. Like I said, there's not going to be any cash value here that they can really tap. But if the underwriting demands it, final expense is a great approach. However, let's take a look at a hypothetical client who is in this same kind of demographic, but maybe is in a little bit better health status. This is a hypothetical guy who was born January 1st, 1962, and is a male who does not use tobacco, non-tobacco user. For this hypothetical gentleman, if we were looking at insurance coverage for him and we quoted him final expense, if he said he felt comfortable with about $70 or $80 a month, we could get him a benefit of about $30,000, maybe a little better, maybe a little worse, depending on what companies we go with. However, if we take him through a fully underwritten universal life policy, we can get that same client $75,000 of death benefit at $85 a month, not to mention all the additional benefits that are typically going to come with that sort of policy. Now, what does this tell us? This is a client who would be in the demographic that we're targeting for final expense mailers, but he would not really be a suitable candidate for final expense. As we can see, if his health status is going to permit him to go through full medical underwriting, then it makes more sense to go that route because the value to the client is going to be much more significant. Rather than getting a $30,000 benefit, he's going to get $75,000 of benefit, plus all the benefits of the more robust universal life policy as opposed to the pretty stripped down final expense coverage. Let's take a little bit closer look at underwritten coverage versus final expense insurance. On the underwritten side, typically the value overall is higher. Underwritten coverage is usually going to have a little bit more robust language in like the terminal illness benefit rider, the chronic illness benefit rider. The cash value benefit may be a little bit easier to access there, whereas with final expense, your premium is going to be a little bit higher and you're going to have fewer benefits. That equates to a lower value. Your cash value isn't going to be there and your death benefit is going to be fairly low. Now, it's not all tilted in favor of underwritten coverage, however. Underwritten coverage is slower to issue. So if you got to do a fully medically underwritten policy with a paramedical exam and everything, you could be looking at a couple of weeks before you get a policy approval. Whereas with final expense, some policies you'll know before you leave the client's house whether or not he or she has been approved for coverage by the insurance company or not. So it's really, like we said, it's not all tilted in favor of the underwritten coverage. Not only that, underwritten coverage is going to be a little bit more difficult to get approved for. With final expense, the real benefit here is with the underwriting. If your client has a really colorful health history that would prevent them from obtaining fully underwritten coverage, final expense is probably going to be the way to go. However, too many agents out there take a look at a client's demographics, age and income, and say, yeah, final expense, no question about it. But if you've got a client who's healthy, fully underwritten coverage, even though the coverage is a little bit slower to issue and a little bit more difficult to approve, if they can get through that approval, because they're a little bit on the healthy side, then you're going to blow away all the other offers this client is getting for final expense insurance. Because other agents out there are just looking at those demographics. You got to take your client's full insurability picture into account. If you're talking to this client and you figure out, hey, you're pretty healthy, well, why are you looking at final expense at that point? If you can get them approved for traditional coverage for more than double the benefit, why wouldn't you do that? So the verdict here is just because you can write a final expense policy doesn't mean you should. You'll find a lot of folks out there who have a final expense policy who could maybe qualify for a fully underwritten policy, and it's a good switch to make. And if you're out there writing final expense on everybody under the sun, there's going to be agents coming behind you replacing those policies with much cheaper coverage. You know how the final expense market works. If you offer a client, $5 less a month than they were paying previously, they're going to take that deal any day of the week. What if you offer them $5 less and $30,000 more worth of benefit? They're going to knock you over trying to sign up for that. So just because you can sell final expense to a client doesn't mean you should. Explore all of your options. Make sure that you're taking into account all of the different policies this particular client could potentially qualify for, because it's a good chance that you could present them with an option they haven't thought of before that brings them a lot of additional value that they had given up on. So final expense, like we say, it's right a lot of the time, but it's not right every time. And hopefully after today's webinar, you've gotten a little bit clearer picture on when it's appropriate to use final expense. Thank you guys for joining us. If you want to learn more about final expense insurance or get more in-depth webinars like these, come visit us at iliaa.org and become a member of the Independent Life Insurance Agent Association. Thank you again, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.